Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips, which is brought to you by Wellness Forum Health, the Wellness Forum Institute, and Make Americans Free Again. Just reminding everybody, tomorrow, Friday, is the beginning of the Food Over Medicine retreat. It's a Friday night, Saturday all day and evening with meal breaks, and then a special session on Sunday night that includes a batch cooking class and a get started and make a plan section of that class to make sure that you take action on what you learn. So what are you going to learn? I'm going to deliver the workshop, Why is it so hard to lose weight? The great protein debate. We're going to talk about some dietary supplements and habit change, and then topics you've been asking about, like irritable bowel and gluten and glyphosate and inflammation and all kinds of things like that, right? So lots of topics, lots of time for Q&A because it's a long session. We're recording it, so if you were to sign up for this and you couldn't join us live, we'll make it available to you via video, and that's how a lot of our people watch a lot of our stuff, actually, because it's difficult to set aside a whole weekend, and particularly if you decide at the last minute, so you can watch it on the video. So anyway, if you would like information on that, send me an email at pampopper@wellnessforum.com. I have two news items to share with you today, both of them kind of disturbing, a reminder of why we're not finished yet, why we have to be diligent and start more tribes. We did start a couple new tribes lately, which is very encouraging to me. We need to start about 200 more tribes, and I'm hoping what I tell you today is going to make you motivated to want to do it. So one of our very generous donors happened to be visiting the Bradford Museum, which provides information about a lot of things, including the development of nuclear bombs for World War II. The museum also includes the Los Alamos National Laboratory. And she writes that what surprised her was an exhibit about viruses and vaccines and finding the best spots for setting up surveillance cameras to detect outbreaks. Isn't it just wonderful to think that you won't have to go get a PCR test? There will just be devices all over the place. And if they spot you and you look like you're a person who has a virus, they can just quarantine. Well, anyway, she sent me some screenshots, and I decided to go look at the website myself. And I won't read it all to you. I found a lot of disturbing stuff, but one was a brochure posted on the site informing us that, quote, the laboratory provides technology expertise and on-the-ground support to agencies tasked with managing biosurveillance threat. And then they had a long list of all the agencies that they work with. And here is the list: CDC, USDA, Department of Defense, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Armed Forces Health Surveillance Center, the International Society of Disease Surveillance, Department of Health and Human Services, and the Department of Energy. So these were the agencies that got all involved in the COVID response. And I'm so glad that they're communicating with this lab about biosurveillance and cameras to figure out who's got a virus. What a lovely thought. So the fake pandemic machinery is still in place and ready to strike if needed. And the same machinery is there if we end up with a real pandemic. And that's what I'm going to talk about next, the possibility of that. You know, with the amount of unrest in this country, as I said last week, a fake or real pandemic might just be the thing to get things back in order. And by getting back in order, I mean working for the medical, pharma, public health, government-controlled cabal. So I'm super concerned, and even more so after what I'm going to share with you next. So this has to do, the information I'm going to share with you next has to do with one of our defendants, Ralph Barrick, and the University of North Carolina, where his lab is based. So an article was recently posted as a preprint. It was authored by Stephen Massey and Dr. Stephen Quay, who you might remember is one of our expert witnesses and also spoke at our conference last fall. The authors make the case that lab leaks of man-made viruses are taking place right here in the United States, but the people involved in it know that it's happening, they cover it up. The next disaster could be something super serious, and it could leak right here from someplace close to you. And these labs are all over the country. I mean, there are dozens, probably well over a couple hundred of them. So here's the story. Massey and Quay start with what we already know. There is a lot of debate going on right now. We're having that debate in court, in fact, about whether or not gain-of-function research serves any purpose that justifies the threat that it poses to human beings. MAFA attorneys have argued in court that the only people benefiting from any of this is people like Peter Daszak, formerly of EcoHealth, who got rich, and Mr. Barrick, who's accumulated a lot of money. It's terrific for the people who get funded to do it, not so much for us. Now, consider the insane argument that people who conduct this research make. And so we need to be prepared for a virus or several of them to jump species, and we have to have treatments and vaccines ready. So to do this, scientists have to make the dangerous pathogens and then develop treatments and vaccines for them. So the dangerous pathogens don't exist right now. They haven't jumped species, but making them in a lab is part of a plan to protect us. I mean, just think about the insanity of this. I don't know how they say it with a straight face and put it in grant proposals. Additionally, proponents claim that if the work is done in a BSL-3 or 4 lab, it's safe. Well, first, Daszak and his people were supposed to be conducting their research in a BSL-3 or 4 lab, but instead, they conducted it in a BSL-2 lab that was controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. They were reckless, they were deceptive, and their ridiculous scheme ended up in disaster, which is why we're suing them. There are a whole lot of people associated with this who we have sued. But Massey and Quay present evidence showing that viruses are leaking from BSL-3 and 4 labs right here in the United States, including at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, or UNCH, which is the home of Ralph Barrick, one of our defendants. Massey and Quay identified 7 lab-acquired infections, LAIs, that took place between June 2020 and January 2021, which had a high probability of being SARS-CoV-2 variants, which were actively being studied at UNCH and BSL-3 labs at that time. The authors state that the fact that this took place in what many people refer to as the premier coronavirus synthetic biology lab in the world, combined with a failure to report these LAIs, shows the failure of current regulations. Regulations, by the way, include mandatory reporting. And this has been a long time, and I've been talking about this for a while, but Daszak got in trouble for not reporting based on benchmarks that were supposed to trigger him to report. And apparently, Mr. Barrick doesn't think he has to report either. I mean, they just act as if though they think that the rules don't pertain to them. And then they end up creating messes where there are a whole lot of rules that you and I have to comply with. And that's what makes this so aggravating. The article's super interesting to read if you like science. I do, but going through it all verbally probably would put you to sleep. But Massey and Quay were able to determine that these infections came from the UNCH lab because there are markings that indicate where viruses come from, including those that are man-made. So they contacted the lab personnel at UNCH who had reported the suspected cases, but nobody answered them back. So, but after that, they were subsequently contacted by an organization in Washington, D.C. I'd never heard of, called GISAID, or the Global Initiative on Sharing All Influenza Data. So when this organization contacted them, they said that complaints had been received about them from the Centers for Disease Control and the University of North Carolina about the article they were writing, and GISAID threatened to revoke their access to data unless the metadata and sequences were removed. And I'll tell you, when they start threatening you, you know you're right over the target. There were lab leaks at UNCH, and the government's trying to cover it up, along with all this creepy crawly network of alphabet soup agencies and government entities and that sort of thing. It's just incredible. Even more concerning, the authors write that a deeper look into the biosafety history of UNC's high containment laboratories reveals a pattern of safety breaches involving lab-engineered coronaviruses, including strains that were closely related to both SARS and MERS, and MERS was quite deadly. In other words, this has been going on for a real long time. It poses a significant health risk for everybody. And I'll add again that there are dozens of these labs all over the United States. It's likely you live close to one of them. From January 2015 to June 2020, UNCH reported 28 laboratory incidents involving genetically modified organisms to the NIH Office of Science Policy. Of those, at least 6 incidents involved engineered coronaviruses, specifically SARS and MERS-associated strains used in mouse infection models in BSL-3 labs. So even when you up the safety, it doesn't fix it, all right? So of course, BSL-2 is beyond comprehension reckless, but it doesn't help to have more safety. This stuff just plain leaks out. We shouldn't be doing it. Each of these incidents involved some level of potential exposure for lab personnel who were subsequently placed under medical surveillance. In one of the most alarming cases, a researcher was bitten in February 2016 by a mouse infected with a synthetic SARS coronavirus. Despite the pipe puncturing 2 layers of gloves and the skin, the scientist wasn't isolated and was just asked to report her temperature and her symptoms while she continued to work and move through public spaces. Well, that's how something dangerous escapes. A person who comes in contact with the virus and then walks around. I mean, that's to a certain extent pretty much what we know happened in Wuhan. The pattern of lenient post-incident procedures persisted. In April 2020, a researcher was bitten by a mouse carrying a strain of SARS-CoV-2, triggering a 14-day home quarantine. UNC officials consistently refused to provide any details about the incident, the extent of the exposure, and the risk that would be posing that the whole thing would be posing to the surrounding community, despite federal guidelines that say that you're supposed to do that when you're dealing with genetically modified pathogens. Analysis and sequencing of 8 suspected SARS-CoV-2 LAIs originating from UNCH, North Carolina, shows that claims of containment are incorrect. The data suggests that laboratory strains found their way into hospital patients, which means that the viruses escaped the lab and infected people in the surrounding community. And that's the problem with this research. You make something dangerous and then it gets out. I mean, they've made science fiction movies about this for years, and we're starting to live in a science fiction movie. So essentially, this undermines the assurance that if you just do it in a more secure lab, it's going to guarantee biosafety. So the question isn't whether this stuff happens in more secure labs. It happens, and it's going to continue to happen. The real issue is if there's anything that can keep it from getting out of hand. And the answer, at least at this time, Massey and Quay respond, is no. And that takes me back to last week's video. Barrick and his virus-making friends have already shown callous disregard for federal regulations and human safety, which is how we ended up with SARS-CoV-2, which escaped either on purpose or by accident. It really doesn't matter to a certain extent. The bottom line ends up being the same. And again, this time we don't have to rely on the Chinese to do it. We have plenty of dangerous viruses being made in labs all over the United States. And that could accidentally or on purpose release something horrific that could bring our society and economy to its knees. And some of you live really, really close to these labs. And again, I said this last week, and I think it bears saying again, our country is in a very tumultuous situation right now. And we have people who really are so opposed to what's going on. I don't want to get into right and wrong. This isn't the place for it. My point is that, we've seen people pick up guns and shoot people. I mean, people do incredibly violent, god-awful things to one another. Unfortunately, that's one of the qualities humans have. And so releasing a dangerous pathogen to upset our current state, and I said last week, they're not going to do another COVID type thing. They know they can't get away with it. Instead, this might actually be something that if you walk outside, it'll kill you. And I said that back in 2020, by the way, that public health had destroyed its credibility, and that at some point in time, we were going to really need to heed the advice to stay home, to wear a mask, perhaps. I mean, there's a time and place for that, and we're all going to just yawn and go on about our business, and something terrible could happen. So anyway, I feel so committed. I've always felt committed to our litigation. I feel even more committed to it right now because we're the only people who are pursuing these people. I mean, I think it's great that Dr. Quay and this other guy are writing about it. I think it's terrific that I can tell you about it. When we're the only people doing anything about it, And so I feel real committed to doing it. I hope you do too. And that brings me to my weekly reminder, please send money. What we're doing is important, but it costs money. So if you commit $5 a month, if enough people do that, we would be fine. So any amount of money helps. It really does. And I hate to always beg you for money, but I hope I'm making a good case for why you need to do it. All right. Remember, Food Over Medicine Retreat starts tomorrow. It's not too late to enroll. We're recording it. You can watch it later if you can't participate live. We're going to cover a lot of great topics. You'll learn a lot of stuff, whether you're live or watching it after the event takes place. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think would enjoy watching it and learning from me. I will be back to you next week with more news. Thanks for watching.